Roy is the healthcare policy advisor to former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who is now running for the Republican presidential nomination. Roy previously advised 2012 presidential nominee Mitt Romney. Roy is a senior fellow at the conservative policy research group Manhattan Institute. He joins us in studio. Avik, what was your reaction to the Supreme Court decision today?
Well, I agreed with the dissent more than the majority opinion. I thought that the majority's reasoning that when it said established by states, it really meant established by the states or the federal government. They kind of rewrote the law to suit the policy outcome they wanted, and the Supreme Court's not supposed to do that.
Well, under conservative legal theory, they are in some part supposed to measure the intent of what they were looking at. But let's put that aside for a second. What about the overall existence, the continuing existence of the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I think that it's very important that the Supreme Court, however it ruled in this case, not one word of the Affordable Care Act, the actual law, would have changed. So this ruling wouldn't have affected the law as it is. It would have affected the implementation of the law, but it wouldn't have affected the letter of the law at all.
But you don't like the law.
Well, I'm a critic of the law. I don't think it achieves the goals it sets out to achieve in terms of making health care affordable for everyone.
All right, one of the main goals, of course, of having health insurance is that it protects people against bankruptcy and avoids premature death. Would you agree with that?
Not necessarily.
No?
I think actually a lot of people are seeing increased costs under the ACA.
I want to get to that in just a second, but the general premise that the more people who have health insurance, you essentially protect them from catastrophic financial ruin and you prevent them from dying, and that's good for the economy, right?
Well, I think it would be good in theory for everyone to have the financial security that comes from being protected from catastrophic financial loss due to health care bills. Unfortunately, the ACA doesn't really achieve that.
But it does achieve the idea of expanding the pool of people who are covered by health insurance. 2010, it was 18% uninsured in this country. Now, 11.9%.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that's a fairly superficial way to look at how people are covered. Not all insurance products are the same, and health insurance doesn't necessarily mean health care. So there are a lot of people in America who are on Medicaid, but all the medical literature shows that people on Medicaid have no better health outcomes than people with no insurance at all.
And yet some of the states that have opted into the Medicaid expansion are reporting a surge in the diagnosis of diabetes. And if you can diagnose diabetes early, you can save society, you can save that person in terms of medical costs. So wouldn't that suggest that the Medicaid expansion has actually helped these people and these states?
Well, in theory, again, early diagnosis of disease is important. Unfortunately, the overwhelming evidence with Medicaid is that that's not what happens. A lot of physicians don't take Medicaid. And so you have this card that says you have health insurance, but if you can't find a doctor, a primary care doctor who will see you, you can't actually get that early diagnosis. So that's been a big problem with the Medicaid program over time. That disparity is getting wider as Medicaid's fiscal problems get worse.
Would you suppose it was up to you to replace Obamacare, would you still continue to support the obligations on insurance companies? And we can run through them. Insurance companies no longer can impose lifetime limits on care.
Well, I mean, I think I would broadly say that one problem with the ACA is that it limits and narrows too much the choices in the way people buy health insurance. There's a broad range of insurance products that are suited to different people. We're a diverse country of 300 million people.
That's a different issue than whether insurance companies have to play by a certain set of rules. The idea that they can no longer discriminate against children with pre-existing conditions. They can no longer drop coverage if you get sick. They're required to provide free preventative care. Those are all good things, right, to require of insurance companies?
They're all good things in theory, but what you always have to be mindful of is how much do they increase the cost of insurance. So again, the cost of individually purchased insurance under Obamacare has increased by more than 50% on average since the law went into effect in 2014. So it's great in theory
50%?
To have all these. Yeah,
because
we did a study.
Says that the average premium has increased by 3%.
So we did a study at the Manhattan Institute. We looked at the ACA's insurance filings in every county in America and compared those to what the average price of insurance was pre-Obamacare to buy a relatively inexpensive, affordable plan. We found that on average, and this was in 2014 over 2013, the average increase in the typical county was 47%. So another 2 years have gone by, and increasingly those premiums are going up even more.
But costs are going to go up somewhere if the idea is to try to make the system more efficient and to cover more people.
No, not necessarily. I think that's the fallacy of the ACA, is it thinks that by making health care more expensive, somehow it's going to be more affordable because you can just subsidize it more. That's not really the best way to do things, because we are already having a real fiscal strain in this country. So the best way to actually make health insurance more affordable is to actually limit the government's role in determining how insurance has to be designed.
But by limiting the government role, your plan essentially shifts the burden, that it doesn't make health care more efficient, that it doesn't make it less costly. It simply says, well, instead of the government providing subsidies, it's individuals that have to cover more of the cost themselves.
So that's not correct. So the way the plan works, transcending Obamacare specifically, is that it's actually more progressive in certain ways than the system we have today, because it diverts resources to the people who really need the help, the sick, the vulnerable, the poor. What we do today is we heavily subsidize health insurance for everyone, and we don't need to do that.
But we subsidize essentially the premiums. Under your plan, essentially the premiums would be lower, that's true, but the costs would be higher in terms of copays and deductibles, the so-called hidden costs.
Those aren't really hidden costs. So if you think about auto insurance, for example, why do we buy auto insurance? We buy auto insurance to protect ourselves from the catastrophic financial loss that comes from totaling our car or having that car stolen. We don't expect auto insurance to pay for gasoline or oil changes or car washes. That's how insurance works in the rest of the economy. And when you have insurance like that in healthcare, it's much more affordable for everyone. Right now, the middle class is getting squeezed because the cost of insurance is increasingly eating up more and more of their income, because we're larding on more and more requirements into how insurance works.
Under your analogy, if somebody has car insurance, an insurance company can therefore say, well, you know, you were speeding, therefore we're not going to cover you, and that may be one of the deductibles or hidden parts of the plan. And most people, when they buy insurance, think, okay, I'm going to spend money on the front end. They know what the cost is. They don't calculate what the cost might be, depending on the situation, on the back end.
Yeah, I think it is very important for there to be transparency in the way insurance products are designed. So when people buy that insurance product, they know that if they have cancer, they're hit by a bus, they have a stroke, they're protected. That's a hard-won gain that where the plan can't take away that coverage. That's important. That can be done with a different system than what the ACA offers.
Avik Roy.